Terror suspect shot. Two guys were shot by Victorian police, those wacky nut jobs down here on the banks of the Murray, where there's absolutely no witnesses or video.
That had been under the watch of counter-terrorism investigators.
And why were they under the watch of counter-terrorism investigators?
The brothers had been linked to outlaw motorcycle gangs and converted to Islam while in prison in New South Wales.
That's it. So they're not actually bikies themselves. They just got links to bikies. And they converted to Islam while they're in prison. Okay. There's like 1 billion Muslims on the planet. A lot of people are Muslims. So there are a couple of Muslims. So, seems a bit light on.
It all unfolded yesterday afternoon when these two brothers, aged 19 and 30, were spotted unexpectedly by those investigators from the counter-terrorism unit at a service station.
They were unexpectedly spotted at a service station? Well, you can hardly expect their presence at a service station to be unexpected. Anyone's presence. I mean, go for petrol, the smokes. So it's unexpected that they spotted them there. Well, where did they expect to spot them?
Now, they attempted to stop those two men for what is being described as a precautionary check.
So throughout this whole story, they never mentioned one action that these two guys did that would cause police in any way to give them any attention. They didn't say they, were seen carrying weapons, acting suspiciously, doing anything like that. They've just gone to a service station. So why are these cops going after them? And what is a precautionary check? Well, that's a new one. She says, what is described as a precautionary check? Well, they've got no justification. And I think that's what part of this might be about, conditioning the public that the police now have this new power of precautionary check, where, you're at a service station, you've done nothing wrong, cops are wandering up to you. Yeah? And they don't give any details on what happened at this precautionary check.
But they drove off.
Well, that's actually quite a reasonable action to take. You haven't done anything wrong. Two guys who weren't, these two officers weren't in uniform or anything, as you'll find out in a second. So you've got two guys just wandering up to you. We're just going to do a precautionary check. Well, we're just going to jump in our car and drive off.
It's at this point that local uniformed officers were called in to help.
That's what they called in backup for this precautionary check. And they haven't alleged that they've done anything wrong. It's just precautionary. And suddenly now they've got armed uniformed police involved in just a precautionary check where there's two guys going about their business, not having broken any law.
They tracked these brothers down to the banks of the Murray River.
Well, they're a bit light on detail as to how they tracked them down. And you'll find out later in another interview, you'll know that they knew they were already there. This guy gives it up. So they didn't track them down. They went to where they knew they were staying.
That's when things escalated dramatically.
Okay, so these guys are back at their campsite, back at the peaceful Murray River, and there's all these cops turn up. Well, how did they get approached? Oh, listen, boys, it's only a precautionary check. That's all we're doing. Is that how the cops approached? Well, it's convenient that it's way out in the sticks, and there's absolutely no cop vision, which there would have been released to the public.
Police say that these men rammed the officer's car, then they got out of their vehicle, one armed with a knife, the other armed with a tomahawk.
All right, we've hit full throttle on the storytelling mode, the fairy tale that they're spinning here. There were no media there. Where are they getting this information from? There was no one else there except for the cops. Well, they're getting it from the cops. And as I mentioned before, they've been shown to act like absolute nut jobs in certain situations. And they expect you to believe that the cops went up there calmly and suddenly these guys just rammed cars and started charging at guys armed with guns, with a tomahawk and a knife. What an absolute load of fucking bullshit.
One of those men lunged at police and he was shot. There was a standoff with the second man. Capsicum spray and also a taser were deployed, but when they failed to work and he too lunged at officers, he was also shot by police.
All right, I'm pretty much sure none of that actually happened. None of what she just read out happened. It's complete fabrication. But look, even if the guys did get agitated, well, fair enough. They've already been in prison. They've probably had their fill of cops being in their faces. They've done nothing wrong. They're on the banks of a river, just camping, just getting away from everything and everyone. And they've got these idiots coming at them. They didn't go hunting the police. The police hunted them.
They were attempting to speak to them to assess whether or not they were any risk to community safety.
Okay, now this is from a copper. This absolute nonsense is from a government official, the senior, I think he's assistant commissioner. And hear what he just said. He said the police went up to speak to them to assess if they were a risk. Well, what? Are you a risk? No. I mean, what sort of conversation can you have? You can only assess that they're a risk by something that's observed that they were trying to hide that's been found out. Oh, now we know they're a risk. No one walks up to someone and says, "Oh, we just want to speak to you." This is absolute nonsense. They had no justification, and they haven't said there's been any justification for going anywhere near these guys.
This is just a standard procedure for CT investigators. There was no ongoing CT investigation.
Okay. Yeah, you heard him right. He said this is standard procedure for counter-terrorism investigators. And then he says, by the way, there is no counter-terrorism investigation going on. So how on earth? Now, this is a government official. This guy, we're meant to take him seriously when he says that in the same sentence, a total contradiction. And we're just, I mean, how can you teach kids logic and reason? What's up? What's down? What's right? What's wrong? When you've got this idiot on mainstream TV saying that. Yeah, it's just a standard procedure for investigators. Oh, by the way, they weren't investigating anything. Well, why were they doing the procedure? No, it's a standard procedure. What he's trying to say here is to be in your face for no reason at all. A precautionary check. That's a brand new one.
And there's no threat to the community.
So a second ago, they said the cops went there to assess their risk. Who are they going to go up and ask him? And he's saying, well, there was no risk to the community. Just another contradiction. I don't know whether it's just... look, the script writers cannot get it that wrong. This is just relying on the people to just not pay any attention except for their talking points, which is a precautionary check. Now, here's another conditioning message that they've got for the public.
Now, what we know about the pair, aged 30 and 19, is that they recently relocated to Victoria from New South Wales, and that they'd been believed to be staying at a campground on the Murray River.
So before they said they tracked them, like giving the impression that these guys were on the run. No, she just says they already knew where they were. You don't track someone to your home. Tracking means you don't know where they're going to go, and you've tracked them to somewhere where you didn't know they were going to be. They knew that they were staying there. This is Greg Barton, a so-called terror expert. That's just some highly paid position doing not too much except for these stupid interviews and telling lies. I'll just show a few of his claimers. But just in regards to staying on camping down on the Murray River, let's just see what they've got to say about that.
Focus is online, looking at the online work that some of these radicalised individuals might be doing. Is a lot of it happening off the grid?
That's the concern. People under surveillance know very well that their online habits are going to be monitored, so they try and stay off the grid, the smarter ones.
Now, this is another issue that I think they're edging towards, is they don't want people being off the grid. They don't want people being self-sufficient, not tracking, they don't know what they're up to. They're just living their life, and they don't really want that. So they're trying to tie anyone that's doing that. Well, look, they're just a terrorist trying to stay off the grid to commit terror. Now, how are they going to commit terror from that little campsite down on the Murray River? They've got mobile phones. They'll be tracked. I mean, what, pen and paper? How are they going to communicate? Yeah, okay. So that's really about not wanting people to go off the grid.
We don't know the backstory to this, but we can be sure that they were sufficiently concerned that they'd been reaching out trying to figure out whether these guys represented any sort of immediate threat.
No, Greg, we actually do know the backstory. The backstory is that they were living on the Murray River, camping, That was their accommodation at the particular point in time, and they went to a service station. That's the backstory. And what we don't know is the backstories to the police, and you're a bit vague there. You said, oh, they needed to reach out, and that proved to be true. Well, it didn't prove to be true because our assistant commissioner said there's no threat to the public. Oh, this is just a mess.
In terms of prison, how is that working? Is that being a real source of people being converted to radical ideas?
This is this continuing narrative of trying to control people's, first of all, their speech, and then now they're trying to control ideas and thoughts. And how they're doing it, look, terror is basically is the motivation for an act. Say that Mahama Sharma, apparently, she stabbed that family. They let her in. You know, she had a burqa on. They never seen her face, but you got a 5-year-old kid. Yeah, you do that all the time. Anyway, she got convicted of terror. Now, it's already an offence to stab somebody, but it's her motivation. So it's her thoughts as she's doing it. They're trying to criminalise. And the reason they're doing that now is they're now trying to tie anyone that has a radical thought or an idea is an extremist. And even though it's not an offence yet, they're tying it to terror so that they can then trace people who are having radical ideas. Because, you know, radical ideas in universities used to be applauded. Well, that's a radical idea. Let's try it. Now radical ideas, oh, no, they're bad. They're terror. Because it's about shutting down people who are going to start to have ideas about the bankers. So that's what this whole thing's about.
Look, there's long been a concern, Deb, about people being converted to any kind of religious position in prison.
So Bardo, I've seen, he's popping up a lot, this guy. I feel familiar with him. I just got to start calling him Bardo. So Bardo, he carefully chooses his words there to go all religions, because that's always been their plan. They've had all these hoaxes and false flags blaming ISIS, which they created. And they were always then going to start running hoaxes and false flags with Tarrant, and they're going to have some more down the track, no doubt. And that's what he's talking about here. They don't want anyone, they want to expand it to go after everybody. And also the second thing is they don't really want, as to say, a guy said, because he said there that, you know, it's a concern for any idea. What if someone said, oh, I've converted to Christianity, but I'm going to obey the 10 Commandments? Well, was that a concern? Well, according to him, it is. And it is an actual concern for the bankers, because any kind of religion unites people, and as we know, so that getting rid of organised religion, which is organised unity, that's all of them. That's certainly one of their targets as well.
Now, the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews has also released a statement saying, "I want to thank the brave Victoria Police officers who put themselves in harm's way every single day to keep Victorians safe."
So, it's a long time sellout. He just finishes off with a general statement. He doesn't specifically refer to the officers that, you know, were involved in this scene. He just makes a general statement. Now, obviously, the premise for which the cops were there and harassing these guys, well, that comes into question. But it could also be the case that, you know, none of this happened. But these two guys might not exist. They haven't released their names. That part of it could be faked. Or if they do get a couple of guys that, you know, wander in and stick some bandages on, you know, they could be in on it as well. We don't know. But it doesn't really matter. The point of this story, it's fake either way, in that they just want to get the messages across, being we now have precautionary checks. That's a brand new one. They don't want you living off the grid. They'll start to track you. And also, they don't really want you to be organised and religious. So, yeah. All right, that's it for